Work Standard is a free employer accreditation programme, and it's delivered by the Mayor, and it was developed in collaboration with trade unions, London employers and industry bodies, and it sort of sets the standard for good and fair working conditions in the capital. It sets the benchmark for the best employment practice, and it is the sort of standard that the Mayor would like every employer to achieve and work towards. And at the heart of the Good Work Standard are things like fair pay and the London living wage, skills and progression, diversity and inclusive recruitment, and employee voice engagement, and really supporting the well-being of your staff. As part of the Good Work Standard, we have a real community of employers. You can see them on the screen there waving at us from City Hall. And they are all committed to good work and continuous improvement. And we provide free to access webinars, workshops, events, and networking opportunities, including ones like today, working in partnership with really great organisations like Thrive London and Healthy Dialogues. And we're really hoping that our community can stay at the leading edge of best employment practice through learning opportunities like today. And this webinar has really come about also following some feedback from our community on trying to understand the effectiveness and the uptake of employee assistance programmes, and really how you can support mental health in your staff and in the workplace, which today's session will take a much deeper look at. Mental health at work is a really core part of the Good Work Standard, and we're hoping today will really help you get the most out of any employee assistance programmes that you might already have or that you might be looking to introduce into your workplace. So before I hand over to our fabulous trainer, a quick bit of housekeeping. Please do keep your mics on mute whilst Rebecca is speaking, and you can pop any questions in the chat. I think we've got Helen here on hand to help with any tech or to support in the chat, but I'll also be on hand if you have any questions around the Good Work Standard. And Rebecca, I think we'll be using Mentimeter, so please do get involved and try and participate today if you can. Please do be respectful of other learners when they're speaking and as they're sort of popping things into the chat. And as I mentioned, we will be recording this session, so if you'd like to have your cameras on, you will be included in that recording. And if you do have any questions on the Good Work Standard, anything that we do cover today, or you just want to have a chat about good work in general, please do get in touch with myself and the team at fairness@london.gov.uk. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca McLean, an assistant health psychologist at Healthy Dialogues, who'll be taking us through EAPs in much more detail. Over to you, Rebecca.
So yeah, thank you, Lucy. So I think Lucy's kind of summarised quite well what we're going to be looking at today. So we're going to be talking a bit about EAPs and other mental health offers that you might have. Talk a little bit about what they can include. Obviously, it does vary quite a lot. And we're going to look at some of the barriers that people might have in accessing them, because we know uptake can be quite low across different organisations. And you'll get a chance to kind of think about maybe how you've tried to encourage uptake before and where that has and hasn't gone well. And then we're going to talk about how we have conversations about EAPs and mental health in general, and then look at how you might be able to take a different approach, essentially, to encourage uptake in EAPs. And you'll have a workbook that will give you towards the end of the training that will give you a chance to really plan that in a bit more depth. I think Lucy kind of gave a really good summary already of good work standards, but I think it's really important just to recognise that there are 4 different pillars of good work standards, and we're really focusing on one today, which is engagement, voice and well-being. And really mostly focusing on health and well-being. So thinking about how we can better support employees' health and well-being. And a big part of that is Employee Assistance Programmes, or EAPs. So what is an EAP? Well, there are lots of different ones around and they do all vary, but essentially they're a benefit that some employers will provide to their employees. It's free access to a whole host of different support. It's usually confidential support around different health and wellbeing concerns. It is often 24/7, not always, but often, and it does typically tend to be short term, although some might be able to provide referrals onto longer term support. And like I say, the support offered does vary, but typically it's things like CBT, counselling. You might also find things like gym memberships, self-help resources on there as well. It's really worth having a look at what's on offer in your particular organisation, because as I say, it does often vary. So why should we be offering EAPs? Why would an employer offer this? Well, there's a real moral element to this. So we know that they boost employee health, they boost employee overall well-being. But also it has a more sort of real benefit of things like increased work performance, increased productivity. It can reduce staff turnover, reduce absenteeism and presenteeism as well. So there are lots of great benefits both to the employer but also to the employee. Having said that, though, we do know that uptake can be quite low. So there was a survey done recently where they looked at different organisations that offer EAPs to have a look at the usage rates, and they really varied anywhere from between 2.5% to 16% uptake within those organisations. So we know lots of employees aren't uptaking the EAPs that are on offer. So we have lots of different opportunities to try and encourage people to engage. And we're going to talk about how we might do it on sort of a bigger scale, how we might raise awareness on a bigger scale later on. But first, I want to really think about how we might do it when we are having conversations with people, how we might want to build trust with people to make them feel more comfortable to talk about it. And the first part of this that I want to focus on is unsolicited advice. So unsolicited advice is when someone pushes information, advice, suggestions on us, and we didn't really ask for them. We don't really want them. We often don't really take this on board because we don't really want it. So I'm sure everyone here has received this kind of advice at some point. How does it make us feel? Please do pop in the chat how it makes you feel when you receive this kind of advice. You can sum it up in just one word. How do you feel? Like, leave me alone. Yeah, absolutely. It feels like criticism. Yeah. You feel annoyed? Absolutely. So does it make us feel like this, or does it make us feel like this? I think we'd all agree it usually makes us feel like the picture on the right. You know, we feel really frustrated. We feel maybe really agitated, ignored. We might feel quite defensive. Often we don't take this advice on board. We either ignore it or we might even push back against it because it's just not what we want to hear, right? It kind of triggers an evolutionary response to threat within us, right? It makes us feel like we're under attack, and often we're not really in a position to hear the advice and take it on board. So it's really important if we're going to give advice to other people that we do it in a way that is more acceptable to them. And we're going to look at a framework in a few minutes that can really help us to make sure we're giving advice in a way that people do want it. But I think what's equally as important is also recognizing that often people do have ideas, they do have solutions, and it can be really helpful to try and draw that out from them as well. So sometimes it's about holding back from jumping in and trying to fix the problem all the time and actually just being willing to hear what people have to say first. Obviously, they might not have a solution, they might not have an idea of what to do. And at that point, it can be helpful for us to give advice, give signposts, whatever it might be, but we want to make sure we're doing it in the right way. And like I say, we are going to look at that later on in just a few minutes. I think kind of linked to this idea is empathy. And I think we talk about empathy a lot, and we don't always stop to really think about what it means, what it looks like. And empathy is about really sort of trying to understand someone else's perspective, really sharing how they're feeling, really sort of being there with them through that. So it's different from sympathy, right? Sympathy is kind of like, I'm sorry it's happening to you, but it's not happening to me. And empathy is really understanding the person's perspective and being there with them through that. And I think a nice way to think about empathy is if we look at this dress on the screen, I'm sure most of you will have seen this dress at some point. And I want you to just quickly pop in the chat what colours you see this dress as. Lilac and brown, blue and black, blue and black, blue and grey. Anyone seeing white and gold? Yeah, we've got a couple of white and gold. Yeah, blue and gold, white and gold, white and gold. Yeah, so we're all looking at the same thing, right? But we're seeing something slightly different. And if I want to talk to you about this dress, and I keep trying to tell you this is a blue and black dress, and you're saying, no, it's not, it's a white and gold dress, or whatever other colours you might see it as, we're not going to get very far in that conversation. We're going to keep butting heads. We're both going to keep arguing our point, and we're just not going to get anywhere. But if I stop and I understand and accept that to you, this is a white and gold dress, and I start the conversation from your perspective, I'm going to get much further in that conversation with you. And it's the same when we're talking about anything else, whether that's health and well-being or really anything. If we stop and we understand that someone else has a different perspective to us, but it is theirs and they're entitled to that, rather than trying to push our opinions onto them, trying to push our worldview onto them, we're going to get much further in that conversation. So it's really important that we do our best to be empathetic with someone when we're talking to them, particularly when we're talking about really sensitive topics like mental health, like health and well-being. So thinking about some skills that we might bring into conversations to really show that we're being empathetic, to really show that we're being non-judgmental when we're talking about things, include open discovery questions. And I'm sure most of you will have come across open questions before. So open questions are questions that have an infinite number of possible responses, whereas closed questions are questions that usually we can answer with a yes or no, or possibly a maybe or I don't know. And we can take it one step further than asking just open questions, and we can ask what we call open discovery questions. And open discovery questions are open questions that start with what or how. And the reason that we recommend asking these questions is that they tend to be more curious. They tend to be less judgmental. So if you think about a question that starts with why, for example, why haven't you got help? Why are you off sick? Even if we don't intend for it to come across that way, it might feel judgmental. It might feel accusatory to the other person. But by sticking to these what and how questions, we're really starting to kind of soften that question and make it feel more exploratory, show that we're really trying to understand the person. They also really force the other person to have to think and reflect and process what they're telling us. And we tend to get more information from them. So even things that we didn't specifically ask for, they might tell us because it's really important for them that we know that. So we're giving them more control of the conversation when we ask these types of questions. And we really get their opinions, their feelings, and their wants with these questions. I've got some examples here. And what ideas can you come up with? How are you today? What support would you like? These are all examples of open discovery questions. But of course, there are many, many more that you can think of. Really, it's any open question that starts with what or how. Are there any questions in the chat? Do feel free to pop any questions in the chat if anything's not making sense. And Helen is on hand to help you out with that. Another skill we might bring in is reflections. You might hear this termed reflective listening, and this is something that I think has really grown in popularity in recent years. It's something that's kind of been used in a lot of different environments. Even salesmen are using this now. And reflections are when we give accurate feedback to the other person about what we think they're saying and what we think they mean by that. So what we're doing is we're really taking a guess at what they meant, not assuming that we know what they meant. So if we're wrong, that's okay. because it gives them an opportunity to correct us, and then we're both on the same page. We know exactly what we're talking about. But if we're right, the person feels heard, they feel understood, and it shows that you're really engaged in that conversation with them. And that's really important in building trust, in building rapport with someone, showing that you're interested. And it also really helps to sort of let them take the lead in the conversation, because it's a cue that you're interested. And often you find when you give these, people will carry on talking, and you're starting to hear more of what they want you to know. So with reflections, this is something a lot of us trip up on, but they are statements. They're not asking a question. So there's a tendency to kind of follow it up with, is that correct? Or frame it with your voice. So you go up at the end. We do recommend not doing that. A true reflection is a statement, not asking a question. It just helps to kind of break up some of the questioning that we're doing. It's also not us commenting or giving our opinions or offering advice here. We're just mirroring back what we think the person is saying and what we think they mean by that. And there are a few different types of reflections that we might use, and they range from being more simple to being more complex. So the most simple type is repeating or rephrasing. And this is when we stick pretty close to what the person said. We use a lot of the same words, a lot of the same phrases. And we might pick up on a key phrase or key word that they've used, and we might sort of pepper that back to them. That's that sort of repeating or rephrasing. The next one is paraphrasing. And paraphrasing is when we make a major restatement to what someone said, but the meaning stays the same. So we put it in our own words. And then the most complex type really involves us having to use empathy, like we just talked about. So it's reflection of feeling. This is when we want to pick up on the emotional aspects that someone is communicating to us. So thinking about their body language, thinking about their tone of voice, the words they're using, what it is they're telling us, what emotions might be tied to that. And to kind of give you an example of a reflection. So we've got an example here where someone is saying, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed. I can't keep up with the workload. And I think people are starting to notice that I'm constantly dropping the ball. A reflection to that might be you feel that you're struggling to cope with a heavy workload and notice that mistakes are starting to happen. We're going to have a practice at this in the chat. So I've got a statement here. I just can't keep on top of everything. I'm trying to be a parent, a partner, a carer, and an employee. I don't even get a second for myself anymore. How could we give a reflection back to this person? There's not one right answer, so I do really recommend having a go here, because you might all come up with slightly different things that are all still absolutely perfect responses. And share thoughts on what reflection might to give. Oh, sorry, that's Helen's instruction there. Sounds like you're trying to be lots of things to lots of different people and you don't have any time for yourself. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what they're telling us, isn't it? It sounds like you're juggling different roles and it's challenging. Yeah, absolutely. Really picking up on what they're experiencing with that. Sounds like you're overwhelmed. Yeah, absolutely. You could even keep it really simple and just say you don't even get a second to yourself anymore. So just sort of mirroring back that last part that they've said. I think you need to focus on yourself to be able to help others, look after yourself. That might be kind of moving more into that advice giving there. So not technically a reflection. Reflection is really just mirroring back what it is they're saying to them. And something else we might want to think about using, but this is quite a controversial one, is normalization. So normalization is when we acknowledge that the feeling, the process, the symptom someone's experiencing is normal and other people have similar experiences to that. It can help when someone's feeling really alone, they're feeling really stigmatized, because it shows that other people are going through the same thing as them. And that can help them to feel validated in what they're experiencing. Normalization, however, can be one that we have to tread carefully with. It can be misinterpreted sometimes. So with normalization, it's important that we're letting people know that they're not alone, but we're not disregarding their experience. So, if someone's just experienced a bereavement, if we say, oh, well, everyone's gone through that at some point, that might make it feel like we're disregarding what they're going through, right? So we do need to be really careful when we're using normalization to make sure that we are really supporting the person in an appropriate way. So we could say something like, it's normal to feel, or many people experience that. I think a real key with this is to try and normalize the emotion that they're experiencing without necessarily normalizing the experience that they've had. And the last thing to think about when we're having conversations is signposting. And this is probably the most important thing to really try and think about. And there's a really great framework that helps us to signpost, and that's called PAPA. So this really helps us to make sure that we're not giving that unsolicited advice to people. So when we do give advice, when we do signpost them to an EAP or anywhere else, that we're doing it in a way that is acceptable, that shows that they're safe and that they're respected by us. And also kind of just make sure that it's actually useful information for them to have. So the first part is permission. So we start by asking permission to share information or to talk about the topic with them. If they say no, we do recommend backing off, because anything we have to say at that point, they're probably not going to take on board anyway, but they might go away and think about it and come back to us in the future. Usually people will say yes, and in that case, it's become their idea to hear this advice, right? They want it. They want to know what you have to say. Then we might ask them what they already know about the topic, start to identify where there might be gaps in their knowledge that you can help fill. This is where we might start to use some of those open discovery questions, those reflections. We might use normalization if we think it's appropriate to really explore the situation a bit more, learn from the person what support might be useful to them. And then we can provide, so we can give tailored information based on what we heard them say. And this really should be tailored. We don't want to be giving generic advice that's just not useful to them. And then the last part is ask again. So we might ask them what they think about the information that we gave them, how they might use that information, if there's anything else that they need from us. Really helps to make sure that they're walking away knowing exactly what they should do, where they should contact, so they're not walking away still confused about anything. So this might look like this. So would it be all right if we talk a bit more about, if they say yes, what do you already know about? We might explore this further. We might use reflections, normalization, open discovery questions to try and get a bit more information about their situation and what's useful for them. Once we feel like we know what might help, here's some information that you might not have heard, and then we give them the information. And then ask, what do you think about that? So make sure that they're happy with the information you gave them. There's not still any confusion there. Any questions on any of the communication skills that we've just covered, please do pop them in the chat. I think Helen can be on hand to answer any questions that might come through. But we're going to move on now to having a think about how we might raise awareness in other ways. So yes, we might do it through having one-on-one conversations with people, but we might also do it on a wider scale, whether that's in team meetings, whether we're doing it through announcements or emails or leaflets or posters or webinars, as someone said earlier. And it's really important that we do plan these appropriately. So we might think about announcements, leaflets, posters. It doesn't matter so much how we do it, as long as we're really getting the messaging right. So we're really doing it in a way that works for the people that we're trying to encourage. And it's really useful here to start trying to understand from people what they think would be useful. You might think about having informal conversations with people. You might run surveys to understand what they think would be useful to start encouraging people in the team or the organization to engage with EAPs. And it's important that we do follow that. What's also important is that we think about how we might make sure that we're always giving accurate information here. Make sure that it's always up to date. It might involve us having to do a bit of our own research constantly to make sure that we're always giving accurate, up-to-date information. make sure that we're really trying to build motivation to participate, right? We're really trying to show them why they should, what benefits they'll get from that. But we're not forcing them. We're never forcing people to do something that they don't want to do. It's always optional. If they want it, it's there. But if not, that's absolutely fine. And there's a really nice framework that can help us to make sure that we're getting messaging right when we are trying to encourage people to do any behavior. And that's EAST. So the EAST framework, some of you may have come across this before. So EAST stands for easy, attractive, social, and timely. And easy is really kind of based on this idea that as human beings, we always want to take the path of least resistance, right? We want to do the easiest thing. So we want to do our best to try and reduce any friction, any barriers that might be getting in the way of people in accessing their EAPs. So what might be making it more difficult for them? Is it that they are struggling to find the right contact information? Is it that they're struggling to find what support's on offer or whether they'll meet that criteria? We want to make sure that it's as easy as possible. We also want to make sure that any messaging we're giving is really simple, because we don't want people to have to think too much. Often they won't engage if they have to use too much brain power here. The next one is attractive. So we really want to try and attract attention in any way that we can. It might be that we use bright colors or images, but also thinking about how we might attract attention in other ways. So thinking about how we might maybe make it novel in some way with our messaging, right? So we want it to stand out in the crowd. Humor is a really nice way that people often do that. Thinking about incentivizing as well, if there's any opportunities to incentivize, whether it's a prize draw or something. But also, I think highlighting the benefits within itself is an incentive. If we show why they should engage with it, what they're going to get out of it, that is an incentive for the people that we want to engage. We also want to make sure that it aligns with a positive social image so that they see it as a positive thing for them to do. It makes them feel good that they've engaged with this. And it might be thinking about sort of the messaging, making sure that we're not seeing it as a burden for people to engage, that actually we're seeing it as something that we as an organization want people to be doing. Next one is social. So this is quite similar, really trying to show that it is a socially acceptable behavior. It's something that we want people to do. It's something that is socially acceptable to the people around them as well. There are many ways that we could do this one as well. I think a really nice way is thinking about case studies, for example. Anyone who's had a really successful interaction with an EAP, maybe they might feel comfortable giving a case study on that we can share out. Also thinking about how behavior travels through networks. So we tend to do the things that the people around us do. And we can play on this when we're trying to encourage people to engage with EAPs, thinking about how we might target certain people who can then have that behavior spread through the rest of the organization. And the last one is timely. And it's really important that we do share messages at the right moment. That's both sort of on a grander scale, in people's entire lives. So thinking about, say, when someone's coming back from maternity leave, that might be a really good opportunity. But also even thinking down to sort of the month, the week, the day, the time of day. When is the exact right time for someone to be engaging with an EAP? So thinking about, in the afternoon, is that the best time when everyone's quite sleepy, or actually do we want to do it right in the morning when everyone's switched on? Obviously, that's for you to decide with the people that you're working with. Also thinking about the short-term benefits of people. People tend to struggle to do things when all they see are really long-term benefits. It's too far away for people to really have that much motivation to put things in action. So if we can highlight any short-term wins that someone will get from doing this, that can be really useful as well. So we have developed a workbook for you. And this has a brief conversation guide in it that can kind of give you some ideas about things that you might want to include when you're talking to people. So just kind of reiterating some of the skills that we've talked about and some more examples of those. And then there is, I'll show you what it looks like while I'm talking about it. So here's the workbook, and I'm going to give you a link to this in just a second. You've got the conversation guide here, and then we have a a really nice space here for you to start planning exactly what you're going to do and trying to think about how that fits within that EAST framework. So how is it going to be easy? How is it going to be attractive? How is it going to be social? How is it going to be timely? And there's some space down here for you to really start thinking about what you might need to develop for this, whether that's a slide deck, a poster, whatever it might be, and thinking about exactly how are you going to use that when you are trying to encourage uptake. I'm just going to give a quick summary of everything we've covered. So I think we've covered quite a lot in quite a short space of time. We've looked at employee assistance programs, what they might include, and also talked about why they might be being underused very often. We've looked at some really important conversation skills to think about including when you are talking about EAPs and mental health offers. So thinking about open discovery questions, reflections, normalization, using that PAPA framework as well. And then also think about how you might be able to better plan any awareness raising that you're doing to really make sure that we're encouraging participation effectively. And you have a workbook now that you can take away with you and that can help you in developing a more clear plan for yourself. If you are interested in finding a bit more information, if you want some more resources, there is Good Thinking's employer toolkit. I'm going to pop a link to this in the chat for you as well. This is a really great resource to have a look at, and you do get a chance to. And we have just a couple of minutes. So if anyone does have any questions, please do feel free to ask them in these last couple of minutes. If there are no questions, or if you would prefer to ask them more privately, Helen and I will stick around to be able to answer any questions. But if not, please do feel free to go away, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And we just want to say thank you from all of us for coming along and really taking part in today's webinar. We do hope you found it useful.